What's up, Matt?
Ooh.
There he is. What's up, dude?
Yo, what's up, man?
How are you, bud?
What's up?
Good, just trying to keep it real.
You're looking good, man. How are things?
Nah, dude, just working my ass off and still training hard and putting together manuals. And we just signed Julius Maddox to our media team. So just trying to get all of his stuff straightened out and get his internet straightened out and his website and all of his products. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's a great guy, but he doesn't seem technologically advanced.
Well, that and he's in a bad area. He's in Owensboro.
Exactly.
There's not a lot of people down there to help a lot, you know?
Yeah, there's not a lot of anything down there.
No, it's pretty out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So, just so you know, I think we're going to be, we're recording already, but we're just going to kind of start a conversation. And then as we invite people in, we're going to let kind of the gallery fill up a little bit. And then we'll kind of get into a little bit of the interview.
Sure.
And then if there's some questions from the audience, we'll kind of take those. And at the end there, we'll get to let you pimp yourself out a little bit. Or just the whole idea is just basically to have people walk in to you and I basically having a conversation like we kind of normally would.
Yeah, no rush, man. No rush. I got nothing to do, so don't worry about it.
That's bullshit. You got so much fucking shit to do.
Well, I blocked off at least 2 hours, so we should be good there.
Well, I appreciate that. Josh, do you want anything to say, or Andrew?
Yeah, so Andrew and I will be moderating everything in the chat. Andrew may throw up a survey for the audience members. If you see that on your end, you could just exit out of that and disregard it. And then other than that, we'll when we kick things off, we'll play a little video from Mark introducing you to the audience. And then I think normally we've been starting out with poop stories to test all the audio and visual stuff. So if you have a good poop story to kick things off with, we could go with that too.
Probably the one that tops all of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Eddie 2 weeks ago gave a legendary poop story, so that this will be a good one to hear.
Bald fingers up his ass and going to the ER, then he has me beat.
No, it's not that one. All right. So because we're 10 years old, let's hear it. Let's hear your poop story.
All right. So 2004.
And just so you know, this is when people are going to be like walking into the conversation.
Yeah. So 2004, I'm in graduate school and I'm broke as shit, right? I mean, most of us have been there at one point or another. I'm in graduate school. I'm living on a $500 a month stipend. Luckily, my graduate school is literally where I grew up, so it wasn't far from my mom's house, so I was able to stay there. And I had ordered this 5-pound bag of Iron Mind protein the year before, right? And it was in my office because I was an undergraduate strength coach. I was one of the first undergraduate strength coaches at Ball State to be hired without a degree yet. And so I was helping with all the sports, and I had this big thing of protein, and I'm thinking, shit, it's been in my office. It's not bad. I don't know. So I make this humongous shake because I don't have any money to eat. It's about probably 32 ounces of just this vanilla protein. It doesn't taste bad. Nothing's wrong with it taste-wise. I drink it, and about 2 hours later when I get off work, my buddy calls me and asks me if I want to go to this local brew pub that has these Guinness steak and cheese sandwiches that are absolutely amazing. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I was like, I don't have any money. He's like, don't worry about it. I'll buy. So he buys. We get that. We get like waffle cheese fries. We get a couple pitchers of Guinness, and we're just hanging out. And the next morning I get up and I don't have to take a shit, right? So I'm like, no big deal, whatever. I don't notice anything bad. By that next day afternoon, I'm turning pale. I don't know what's wrong with me. It doesn't feel like something wrong with like my ass yet. It just feels like something's wrong with my stomach, like I have a flu bug. So I talked to Wade and I say, hey, I'm going to go home. I don't feel very hot. So I get home, and next thing I know, I start getting these massive stomach pains, and I can't really figure it out. So I'm thinking, man, I got to shit, but I don't have to shit. So the first thing I do while I can still walk is I go to the local grocery store, and I get like, magnesium citrate. And I'm even bold enough to get some fucking like liquid enemas, right? So I do all that. Nothing happens. I'm on the ground in the fetal position, literally ready to fucking die, right? And the only family member I still have in town is my grandma. So I call my grandma and I'm like, Grandma, you got to take me to the hospital. Something's messed up. And she looks at it. She's on the phone. She's like, I knew it. Those fucking weights were going to hurt you. I knew you were going to go to the hospital. I'm like, Grandma, it's not fucking my knee. It's my ass, right? She's like, well, okay, fine. So she comes to get me, and I literally have to crawl to her car because something's so wrong I can't hardly move anymore. And I get to the hospital, and I go to the ER, and there's this pretty hot nurse that's like just out of like med school. And she's like, what seems to be the problem? I was like, well, one, I haven't been to the bathroom in like 24 hours, and that's very unlike me. And two, I have the worst fucking stomach pains I've ever had in my life. So she goes, well, let's take an x-ray. So she takes an x-ray, and she comes back in with these eyes that look like she just watched a child get hit by a semi. And she's like, sir, you have the largest white mass I've ever seen in your colon. She's like, what the fuck? She literally told me, what the fuck did you do? And I said, I started, going back through my head, and I'm like, well, I drank this protein shake yesterday. She goes, holy shit. It was 32 ounces of protein that solidified in my large intestines and turned into a fucking rock. So they give me this special soak, and I have to put this shit up my ass, and they put me in this room to literally go to a shit capade. So I go to this room, I have to put this thing up my ass and turn it on. And it's in a big IV bag. It's draining in my stomach, and about probably a minute and a half later, I literally overflow the toilet bowl like a cartoon. Smelled the worst possible smell you could possibly. I was embarrassed of my own shit smell. And the worst part about the story was this chick first tried to shove something up my ass to see if she could get anything to move. And I'm like, it ain't going to happen, right? And the worst part is my grandma is sitting right there. The room that, I'm in so much fucking pain that I don't even care. I'm in so much pain that I don't even care. So I go to this room to literally shit myself, overflow the toilet bowl, and they put me in this ER shit room, and I'm literally right next to a lady that's having a kid, and I can hear them whispering. And I'm like, when this demon comes out of my ass, it's full crazy, right? And it's just flowing all over the floor, and I'm embarrassed. And I had to go out and ask for like rags to clean it up. I wasn't even going to let the orderlies clean it up. I cleaned it up myself because I was so embarrassed. And that lady goes, I usually don't tell males that they'll ever have, and you'll know this, Jesse, but since you just had a kid, which congratulations, but
thank you very much.
Yeah, she was like, I usually don't tell males that they'll ever have an idea what it's like to have a kid, but you might be an exception. Well, and yeah, that's my shit story. So anybody can top that, they can have it.
Yeah, really, holy shit.
I literally lost. You guys want to know, the day before, just by chance, I weighed myself. I was 287, and when I got out of the ER, I was 71.
Oh.
I lost 16 pounds in that shit.
And so being a broke college student, did you use the protein again?
Absolutely not.
Fuck! I was hoping that was absolutely, and there wasn't anything after that.
The fucked up part, I couldn't smell protein shakes for the next 5 years. I literally couldn't drink them.
Right.
So I'm not a huge fan of using protein shakes, and a lot of it started because I got so sick from that I get like nauseous thinking about drinking protein shakes now.
Those were the days. That Iron Mind shit was. It's actually really interesting because I didn't have a similar story, but I've had that protein and it's awful. And and the thing with me is like, whenever anyone asks me like, what about protein shakes? I'm like, look, take whatever you can tolerate, because I didn't tolerate. I remember those things. That was a brick. So I can't imagine. Yeah, 32 ounces of powder. That's pretty impressive, bud.
That's me and you. That's me and you were kind of in our young prime, and
our young poor college prime. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. 2003, man.
Yes. Well, we pretty much got everybody full is in here. That's probably going to get in here. More may trickle in. So I want to welcome everybody to the Super Friends series. Super pumped to have Matt Wenning in here, buddy, for a very, very long time. One of the top lifters equipped and raw, and quite honestly, for me and for my money, one of the smartest guys out there. And it's always a pleasure to get to talk with you, Matt, and to call you a buddy and a friend. Really appreciate your time. We're gonna have Andrew go ahead and throw a video on, of Mark, singing some of your praises as well, and then we'll start to kind of continue our chat. But thank you for that epic poop story. That was amazing.
Dude, that was, I'm a fan of all poop stories, but like when you guys do say holy shit, like
that's a holy shit.
Dude. Yeah.
That's get what I mean.
All right, let me get this thing up and running real quick. 1 second.
All right, today I'm introducing.
Not ready yet.
So Matt, how long did you date that nurse?
Oh man, I tell you what, I would have totally dated her after that, but I think I scared her away after it. I would have killed anybody, any trucker in the Pilot gas station. I would have killed that day.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We're good to go now. Let me get this.
All right, today I'm introducing you to one of my all-time greatest super friends. This super friend looks like a superhero, and I'm talking about Matt Wenning. Matt Wenning has done some ridiculous things when it comes to powerlifting, but one thing that he's done where he's one-upped me quite a bit is in the bench press. And I was known as a bench presser for many, many years, but my 578-pound bench press pales in comparison to what Matt Wenning was able to do on the platform. I believe he bench pressed 610 plus pounds, something like that, in competition. Matt is an absolute beast, and he's still really strong. I think the other day he sent me a video of him bench pressing like 505 for some reps. One thing that makes Matt Wenning unique that you haven't really seen from a lot of the other West Side barbell lifters is that Matt transitioned from geared powerlifting, where he squatted over 1,100 pounds and had the all-time world record for a period of time, I believe in a 308-pound weight class in multi-ply gear in the most extreme conditions. And then he took all that stuff off, lost weight, competed at 275, and broke, I believe, the all-time world record in the squat raw. So Matt is a very accomplished lifter, but on top of being an accomplished lifter, he's an amazing coach. And nowadays you see him working with, it's kind of a who's who of great powerlifters around the world that Matt Wenning has worked with. On top of that, Matt has also jumped into building some equipment, and he has his belt squat and a lot of other great inventions and a lot of other great products. Matt Wenning is somebody that I really look up to and admire, not just for the strength that he's demonstrated on the platform, but for the strength that he's demonstrating outside the platform and outside of the gym by becoming an entrepreneur as well. So everybody, here you go. Without further ado, here's my boy, Matt Wenning.
Hey! There you go. Well, Matt, again, buddy, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. We know how busy you are. Thank you for blocking off some time for us. I know everyone in here at least knows a decent amount about you, just by wanting to hear you, in this interview. But can you take just a little bit of time, kind of walk us through your a little bit of your origin story? Help us understand, how, when you got into lifting. Let's talk about also school. And let's talk about how you kind of went through that, how you figured out, wanting to go to West Side Barbell. And then as we go and you kind of finish up like that, we'll transition to some other questions and kind of keep things moving from there.
Sure. So started off as a pretty big kid. I was a really good swimmer as a kid. And my uncle worked in a steel mill, and he lifted weights. And I was probably 11 years old, maybe getting closer to 12. And he had come back to live with our family at the time at my mom and dad's house, and he had brought a set of sand-filled weights. And those sand-filled weights, he was benching 135 for a set of 10. He was only like 155, 160 pounds. And I asked him if I could come in and work out with him, and he went to strip the weights off of the bench press bar. And I said, no, you can leave that. I'll try that weight. And he kind of looks at me confused. He's like, all right, you punk kid, here, give it a shot. And I did 135 for 10 reps before I was 12 years old.
Wow.
Now, keeping in mind, I was probably 145 or 50 pounds, so it wasn't my weight. I was already that weight. But my uncle was completely blown away, and that kind of created a sense of, accomplishment, because my uncle thinks I'm cool now, right? So my dad passes away probably within the next year. and not really knowing why I get to the gym. It was more of a father figure kind of issue. I get to the gym and I'm going into 7th grade. I'm still in 6th grade. And there's a guy named Tim Smith that's there. He is a 500-pound raw bencher at 181 body weight. So watching this guy throw around 500 pounds when you're, 12, 13 years old is just absolutely amazing. And he sees me and he's like, hey, I need a new training partner. You want to come live with us? You're pretty big for a high school kid. And I'm like, I'm in middle school. And he's like, oh, shit. So before he started to let me lift with him, he goes, the only thing I will let you or make you do before you can bench press with me is you have to be able to do a pull-up. Now, I don't know if he meant to do that or if he was just being an asshole, but what it started to get me to realize was that my back had to be strong before my front. And that always stuck with me, and I think that's why I never had shoulder issues, is that he made my back strong before I had to press. Fast forward a couple of years later, I'm already in the 300-pound benches as a freshman. I still have the 8th grade record at my middle school at 250, so 2 plates, a 10 and a 2.5 on each side is still the record as far as I know, which, is insane at 8th grade. I've been 335 as a freshman, 375/80 as a sophomore, 440, 450 as a junior, and I'm right under 500 pounds as a senior year in high school, and that's when I meet Louis Simmons over at the Arnold Classic. So I had a buddy that was really big into bodybuilding that trained with us at the same time at the YMCA, and he sees Louis Simmons, and he knows I'm a big into powerlifting. He's like, you need to go talk to that guy. And I'm kind of embarrassed because he's standing around Dave Tate and Rob Fusner and Chuck Vogelpool and all these other guys, and he finally just basically pushes me over to him. And so I go talk to him, and he's like, he doesn't know who I am yet. He's like, I'm like, hey, I'm a major. I bench 500 pounds. I'm pretty strong. I'd like to come over and hang out with you guys. So, Louis in his standard voice, yeah, come on over, blah, 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 So about 2 or 3 weeks later, I finally get the nutsack to drive all the way over to Columbus, which is a 3-hour drive. And they're doing upper body that day, and they had this huge black dude named Tilt. I don't know what his whole name was, but his name was Tilt. He's like 400 pounds.
I don't think anyone knows Tilt's actual name.
No. So me and Tilt are laying on the ground, and we're doing tricep extensions with dumbbells, and I beat him. I'm using like 85s. I'm 19 years old. So I'm using 85s doing tricep extensions, and Tilt can't do it. And it catches Louis' eye. It catches Dave Tate's eye. And they're like, this kid's a fucking animal, right? And I don't know if I was that strong that day, but I got caught up in the environment, and I wasn't going to lose. And Louis really liked that mentality that I had even as a teenager. So he invited me to come back, and a couple weeks later, I came back and squatted with Chuck and got my ass handed to me. How he always does, just check your ass to see if you got that, right?
Yep.
Now, all this time, I know I want to be a strength coach, but I don't know that strength conditioning exists. So I'm from a small town, and the only strength coach was at the college, and nobody had access to him. His name was Wade Russell, and he played pro football for the Dolphins and the Bengals. He was a tight end. And so one of the ladies that worked with my mom in surgery had a kid that was about 5 years older than me, and he was an accountant, like whiz kid. And he ended up getting an accounting job with the Indianapolis Colts. And at that time, John Toreen was the head strength coach. He coached all the Manning years and all the Edger and James years and Marshall Falk and all these guys. And he goes, well, you ought to come down and talk to John Toreen and see how to get a job like that. Maybe that would be cool. Because all I know is maybe I could be a personal trainer. I don't know strength jobs. I'm from a town of 75,000 people. There was no internet. So I finally get the address to show up, and John Toreen takes me in and shows me the weight room, and he sets me down. He's like, what do you want to do? I said, dude, I want a job like yours. And he kind of giggles at me and, and such. And I said, he goes, well, you can't just be strong to do this job. You're going to need to get a master's degree. You're going to need to be smart too. And that kind of took the wind out of my sails for a minute, because I'm thinking I can be a meathead and be a head strength coach, And he asked me where I'm from. And I said, well, I'm from Muncie. He goes, well, Ball State's there. And I'm like, yeah, it's my home college. I don't know shit, right? He goes, that's the top school in the country for exercise science right now. Dr. Kramer was there.
Yeah.
Dr. Newton. So I'm like, no fucking way. And he's like, yeah. He goes, you need to go back there and enroll to school. So I go back and enroll to school, but I get denied access because my high school grades weren't very good. I didn't really know what I was dealing with my freshman and sophomore year, but a lot of it was probably my dad passing away. I didn't have any focus in school. I wouldn't say I even had the greatest teachers. They just, you know, if they found somebody that was complex or having issues, they just kind of pushed them off into remedial classes. So by the time I was a junior, senior, my grades were better, but it wasn't enough to change my GPA enough to get into school. Now, this is where lifting comes back into play. So the guy that's in charge of the admissions works out the YMCA and has seen me training there for years. And he goes, "You're that kid that's really strong and was just on the news about going to the World Championships, weren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." Well, he asked me a question because it's brand new. It's about creatine monohydrate. And he goes, "Hey, what do you know about creatine monohydrate?" And I said, "Well, I know that it brings more ATP in the cell by drawing more water." So he knows I'm studying stuff. He goes, "You really like this shit, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is really what I want to do." And he goes, "Well, I'm not going to give you any promises, but I'll try to get you in on probation." So 2 weeks later, I get a letter of acceptance through probation. And in my first semester, I get like a 3.8 GPA, and that's over. And by that time, I was already driving to Westside, you know, at least every other weekend to every 3 weeks. So as far as having the educational luck that all of these great professors were there when I was there, and being just close enough to be able to involve myself with Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell at 19, 20 years old was just amazing.
That's insane. Let's can we pause for a second? I want to say, just, you know, for my own curiosity here, you mentioned being able to, you know, lifting through middle school and into high school and all the records and everything. And, you know, I think maybe for some people on the call here, that's extremely foreign. I mean, that's like very much a, like, an Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas thing. We don't have that. And, you know, speaking for someone who has kids in middle school and knows and works with a lot of kids who are in high school, that's just not there anymore. Chet, I mean, it really seems like that was such a huge catalyst for you to propel you not only in your, you know, your lifting career, but also your professional career. I know it's a problem, and this is a huge question, but, you know, the physical education of kids in middle school and high school has disappeared. You know, do you see any answer? You know, what do we have to do to get kids back? Because, I mean, you know, these kids are fatter and more out of shape than ever. And, I mean, it can't be a coincidence that no one's lifting. There isn't PE. You know, it's wild. And, I mean, it really seems like that was such a huge thing for you growing up. And without that, you wouldn't be where you are today.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. But the other point of that is I had to go to the local YMCA and outreach to people that were not around my school, that weren't. I was just happened to find the freaks that were in town that knew that, and they were a bicycle ride away to train with. And what's funny is that Muncie, although it was a very small town, had two very, very distinctive lifters. We had Jim Dawson, which deadlifted 744 pounds at 242 in 1970.
Wow.
Now, keep it in mind that I don't think anybody had pulled 800, and if they had, there were only maybe one or two guys that had pulled 800 at the time. And then Tim Smith comes along in the early 80s and benches 500 pounds at 20 years old at 181. So these guys worked out together, like father and son type deal. And I just happened to get lucky that they were right there at the same time that I was there. So I feel really bad for kids these days that don't have access to that. But then again, you know, guys like me, we have our own facilities. We're not attached to schools. I'm not really at the YMCA. I'm not really accessible to the average kid if they're not already in the know. And I think that becomes a problem, is like, you know, PE teachers and stuff, they take those jobs probably because they're not passionate about that. It's because that's the only thing they had, you know, and that's the sad thing about, I think, our society in general. Take away the kids and all that, is that we don't teach anybody to have any fucking passion anymore. Right? No work ethic and no passion. So teachers fall into that line, you know, coaches fall into that line. You know, it takes a special kind of patience to train younger kids that have no thought past today, and they have to be slow. And I was coachable. And that was the difference, is that these guys saw me. When they told me to stop, I stopped. And when they told me I had to be better at pull-ups before I would bench, I was better at pull-ups. So it's one of those things that was a perfect catalyst. I was a good Coach E, and they were good coaches. So it worked out really well. And so they taught me what they knew. And then Louis stepped it up another 10 notches, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So now let's kind of fast forward a little bit. You're at Ball State. You're able to get over to Westside once or twice a month. And you ended up at Ball State for like 6 years, right? You went for, masters as well. So let's talk about that 6 years. Can you talk to us about, because I think it's really fascinating, and I think, there are so many people who are, I can't, and they have some excuses. Here you are, we already heard about, eating expired protein and putting yourself in the fucking ER, living off of $500 a month while you're living with your grandma, able to make it through, put yourself through school and through a master's degree while traveling 3 hours there and back to Westside to train. Talk about some of the challenges. Talk about, again, you mentioned the word that I think is really important, is passion. Talk about what was the drive, what was the passion, and, let's kind of give us a little bit better of a look into those kind of 6 years. How did you manage all that stuff? Give us some highlights, some lowlights, and we'll figure it out.
Well, I'm telling you right now, if you had it to tell me to do over again, I don't know how I would do it. I think I was just so OCD, and I was so good at focusing on 2 or 3 small things that led to massive things that it took me where I wanted to be. All I knew is that I needed good grades to get in to be a master's student, and I needed to be strong as hell for people to want to listen to me. And I didn't want to be the type of strength coach that was like, well, I know everything, but I've never done anything. And I didn't want to be the meathead that was like, hey, I can lift a lot of weights, but I can't explain it to you. So for me, it was all about the respect. I didn't care about money. I didn't care about job security. All I cared about was the ability to have street credit and the ability for my professors to look at me as the next guy. And so that really helped because I didn't care about partying. I didn't care about money. All I cared about was trying to be the best thing I could be in this small little niche that I thought probably started from impressing my uncle and then impressing Tim Smith and then impressing Louis Simmons. It was all about that. And then when Dr. Kramer and them started to see that I was taking what they were teaching me in class and I was actually applying it, it created this whole aura that Matt Wenning at Ball State at this time was the next big thing. And, it led to 2018, I got inducted to the Hall of Fame at Ball State, which no person in sporting had ever been done outside of like football, baseball, track. I was inducted through powerlifting, which is amazing. Unbelievable because nobody had ever done that as a club sport, you know? So that was just me. I just found what I was passionate at. I dug my ass off to do it. And I wanted to learn probably at first to be better, to make me better. And then I found that I can make everybody else better too. So it was just a win-win situation. But the trials on that is that I didn't have the energy to do what natural college kids could do. I was so sore and so tired and so beat up. That all I focused on was training and learning, but that beat up and tiredness all the time allowed me to focus in school. So what I found was the reason I couldn't focus in high school is I was just too erratic, probably had some form of OCD or ADD, but the lifting actually pulled me down and helped me to slow my brain down and focus. So I kind of found out my own meds through working out.
Yeah, no, the more the more research that comes out on, brain activity and, neural connection, neural branching and everything, I think, you're, 30, 40 years ahead of your time figuring that stuff out. It's pretty, that's, someone who's as much of a nerd as you are. That's pretty fantastic. So since you were at Westside for such a long time and you saw so much of, the change where it was from, you were way back when they were in the strip mall with the spray painted windows and everything, all the way to where it is now. Let's talk about kind of the journey of and also leading into kind of you building on your education and your philosophy of powerlifting and kind of the strength and conditioning in general. Talk us through like the old days, and then talk us through some of those like lightning bolts that either Louis had or you guys had, and how some of those things influenced your education and how your education also influenced your lifting as you kind of went along.
Yeah. So the first time I was probably, saw a conjugate style system was Louis showing it to me. And Louis showing it to me by me training it, actually. Like Chuck couldn't really explain it. Louis could kind of explain it if you could understand in between his jargon, Dave Tate had it pretty figured out, and so did Jim Windler. So listening to them and then going to eat breakfast with them, I started picking up all these ideas. And so what I did was when I came back to the school, I was talking to Dr. Kramer and Dr. Newton. I'm like, man, we are training this crazy fucking way where we're going ultra heavy every week. And then 72 hours later, we're doing speed and blah, 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 blah. And they both look at me and just kind of laugh. And I'm like, what the fuck are you laughing at? Like, this is some big time shit. And they open up this book right here, the first edition of Science and Practice of Strength Training. And they flip to whatever page it is. Sorry, I lost you guys. And then what happened was I started to see the max effort method, the dynamic effort method, and the repeated effort method. And I'm like, holy shit. And then I look at the references. It's 1965 from the Soviet Union. I'm like, this shit ain't new. This is old. And that's when Dr. Kramer and Volek and Newton started to really feed me a lot of information that just wasn't in class. Because now they knew, hey, this kid's a really strong kid. He's top 20 in the world, and he's reading this Soviet literature, and he's practicing it. We're going to teach him everything we know. And that's kind of when I started to realize that the stuff I was learning in class and the NSCA was way far behind of the stuff that was actually being used at the top level. Now, today I understand. I'm like, why the hell are they teaching this if it ain't the best? And the reason is that for generalized strength training, conjugate system is not really the best way to go because it's very hard to coach and you have to know where your weaknesses are. So now I understand why we don't get taught that in school for general physical therapy and general, personal training. It's just too advanced. But back then I was almost angry because I felt like this knowledge should have been for everyone, and it ended up being for only a select few. But you know how it is. You read these books, they're not easy to understand. And that's when I started to realize that what I was doing was on a completely different fucking planet than what everybody else was doing, and I needed to stick to my guns.
In that process of kind of starting to, get into some of the Russian literature and, really getting fed from your professors, what would you take back? Because, I've had the opportunity to be at Westside a number of different times, and I know Lou. When did you kind of start to say, like, hey, let's try this or this, or hey, Vershansky said this or that, or Sif said this or this, and was there ever like an acceptance, or was there just always pushback, or when did you feel like you could start to do some of your own stuff, or was it always just Westside is kind of the only way, shut up and left?
Well, that's when I left. So that's when me and Louis started to have it out, and I go down to train with Chuck. Chuck had left for other reasons, but we were all down at a different gym at that point. And Chuck looks at me and goes, hey, whatever you're doing is working. You have the strongest 3-lift bench that Westside's ever had. You're top 5 in the world now. You have a chance to break an all-time world record. I want you to train the way you think you need to train. Now, when's the last time you ever heard Chuck say anything like that to anybody? I might be the only one. So I'm like, okay, what me and Louis started to get into was I started reading books that Tudor Bompa was putting out on periodization. And the book started to state that they would have the ultra strong athletes go 3 weeks hard and 1 week down away from camp to restore mental clarity and drive to train. So I'm like, wait a minute, I'm starting to feel burned up every 4 weeks. What if I just take that 4th week and back it down to like 50% and recover and then attack again for 3 more weeks? I started doing that, and Louis was fucking completely pissed. But it was working, which I didn't understand why he was mad at me. I was like, what does it matter what I do in the gym as long as I go to the meet and keep getting better? And that's when I realized that there was a lot more ego at play in the gym than there was actually numbers and results. And when I left and broke the world record, which everybody can see in Westside versus the World DVD, right? That's when I started to realize I was on my own train to success, and I knew what the fuck I was doing, and I needed the freedom to do my own thing. So at the time that Louis and I had it out and I left, it was probably one of the hardest times that I ever had, because I moved over to Columbus full time to train there, and I felt like Louis wasn't giving me the freedom to experiment. That's what created a lot of rift between him and I. But then once I left and started to do my own thing, it was the best thing could ever happen to me. And that's why I squatted 1,200. That's why I had one of the highest bench presses at the time as a full meat lifter. And also why my strength was transferable over to raw once I decided to flip to raw. My first raw bench meet I ever did, I benched 600, you know.
So let's talk about kind of conjugate just a little bit. I mean, it's something that, you know, it's a question that I know you're probably unbelievably sick of answering. But you talked about, you know, how kind of complex it is, and it's complex to everybody, and it's a little bit hard to understand. But once you understand it, it's basically just a schedule, and it's really easy. And you know, once you understand the language, it's there. But it's, you know, taking the time to do that. So you've been through both sides of it, you know, and it's amazing that we still hear the the conjugate system can't get raw lifters strong. And, you know, I had to answer that question 2 days ago. You know, like these things that keep kind of coming up. What do you think is kind of that barrier? I know there is some complications, but do you think more of the barrier was the west side or die, the conjugate or nothing type of attitude, opposed to people being like, hey, there's a lot of ways to do all this stuff. If you kind of combine it together, and now we're going to get something. But what do you say to, you know, the question like, A, what is the conjugate system? And B, I heard that, you know, conjugate system doesn't work for raw lifters.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great understanding, and I understand the frustration with that. But let me explain. Okay, so conjugate training, in my own personal opinion, means the conglomeration of multiple training means in order to elicit a specific result. So what you're basically doing when you train conjugate is you're not avoiding max efforts, you're not avoiding getting faster rate of force development, and you're not avoiding repetition or fatigue settings. Those three different things elicit different results. The maximum effort and dynamic effort start to elicit a change in the central nervous system, or the spark plug, in order to initiate more fiber recruitment at the exact time in which you need it. The repetition method is designed for ligament, tendon, bone, and muscle hypertrophy that allows the training of the max effort dynamic effort to occur without detrimental effects to the skeletal system. So you have to have a delicate balance of all three, but there's one thing that makes the wrench come into the wheel, and that becomes, do you know your weaknesses and know where you need to train? So having variation just based on variation, you know, I'm not going to bash on CrossFit, but it's CrossFit. Basically meaning you're going to go in and do something just because you think it's cool. You have to know exactly why you're doing something at all times in order for conjugate system to work. And that's what becomes the complex scenario. Now, it's like anything else, you know. That complex scenario can create a lot of problems when you don't understand your body and you don't understand what you need at what time you need it.
Right. Awesome. So we talked a lot about, you know, trying to impress your uncle, trying to impress some of the lifters that you kind of grew up with, and then, you know, impressing some of your training partners, and then also, you know, everybody else. Who would you say kind of helped you really push forward your philosophy of training, you know, taking the stuff, the book knowledge, and taking, you know, the real life knowledge, the under the bar knowledge, if you will, and applying that forward? Was that your professors? Was that Lou? Was that just your kind of curiosity? Kind of help kind of connect those two dots for us.
The problem was I was in this mixture, this black and white scenario where I was going over to West Side and dealing with Chuck Vogelpool, and then also I would say probably the one that made me learn the most was George Halbert. George Halbert is very underrated. He's probably the one that figured out bands. He's probably the one that fully understood and dialed in chains, and he was the first one that really started explaining to me the strength deficit on speed and why you needed bands and chains in order to elicit high force output. So as far as super smart, George Halbert is very underrated and very underappreciated. I think he's needs to be at least one of the top three people recognized for the current system that Westside takes credit for today. But I would say on a theory side that Dr. Kramer, who's the head of neuroscience and one of the founders of the NSCA, was on the side of showing me how to find the research and find to me what I thought was new was actually old. And then, you know, I still open these books from 25, 30 years ago, and I still get new information from them. So I would say Kramer was the one, the catalyst for that. And then, Louis coming at me with all these different kinds of ideas to understanding how to train and how to do these different things. So it was a mixture of everything. I don't say that one person was actually the actual catalyst. I would say I was just in the perfect storm at the perfect time with the perfect people to teach me at that time. And they knew that I had the work ethic to be, worthy enough to actually learn it.
So since we're kind of talking training partners, give me your top 2 favorite training partners and your top 2 least favorite training partners, whether that's at Westside or kind of in general.
Okay, so top 2 best training partners, you'd have to put Chuck Vogelpool in the mix. And the reason was because Chuck was so intensive and didn't have to say a damn thing to be intensive. He brought a certain aura energy to the gym that you knew it was work time. It didn't matter how bad you felt. When you watch Chuck Vogelpool literally duct tape his ribs together in order to go through a squat workout, you shut the fuck up and bring it. So for me, watching him grind through the last 5-6 years of his training made me realize what it was going to take and the harshness it was going to take to be super good. So I don't know if that's the best training partner, but as far as understanding the drive it was going to take to get me where I needed to be, that was good. But I also learned from a lot of his mistakes.
Let's talk about Chuck, because Mark and I always tell stories about having to work out with Chuck, and especially when we were in upstate New York for one of the WPO meets. And I think he was just actually pissed that he wasn't able to lift, or he put me through Mark. And he's not really well known as a bench presser, but he actually had a pretty good bench raw, but couldn't figure out the shirt. You talked about some of the squat workouts where, you're in there for 2.5, 3 hours, just grinding like crazy. Do you have a favorite or least favorite Chuck Vogelpool squat workout story?
Well, I'll tell you this, the scariest story I've ever had involved Chuck Vogelpool and Vlad Hasselhoff, and they were in the gym squatting, and that's the week before Vlad blew his knees off. They were getting ready for a meet together. Actually, it was right before Vlad squatted the 1250 all-time world record. And they were taking 2 blues and a green, and Chuck had 850 pounds of weight on the bar, plus those bands. If you do the math, you're talking 550 pounds of band plus 800 and something pounds of weight. And he stands up with it like it's an empty fucking bar. And Vlad gets underneath it. And keep in mind, the next few weeks, Vlad squats the all-time world record of 1250. Vlad can't move it. Vlad could barely get it out of the rack, and we had to peel it off of him 3 times. And that's when I knew Chuck, if he had a certain competition and he didn't have a lot of respect for Vlad at the time, he was going to try to kill you. He never really did that with me. He knew I had an off switch and what made me recover. I knew how much it took to get better and not announce more. And that was one thing I think I taught Chuck, was to learn to save some of the tank, because it only matters what you get in the meet. So I would say that was probably one of the top things, that one of the scariest and most impressive moments I've ever seen. I think if Chuck could have showed up on meet day with that level of veracity and not overtrained so much to get to competitions, Chuck would have been the first person to squat 1,300 and multiply easily. The other thing that I really liked was that Chuck, because he saw my bench press keep going up and up and up, he finally completely discarded all the ways he trained bench when we were at Lexington and trained my way. And that was the strongest I ever seen him. I saw him hit a 515 raw bench, which for him was amazing, because a lot of people don't realize the reason he wasn't that good at the bench is because he broke his neck getting body slammed by Matt Dimmel, and it caused arm damage. So that I would say he would be one. And then my training partner that I have now, we call him the world's strongest hipster, Rob Mazer, has probably saved me from 5 or 6 misloads at big world-class competitions by double counting. He's always there to push me. He always is there to, if a client has to come in and work and he knows that I'm trying to focus, he will literally coach for me another person so I can focus on lifting. And you don't find a lot of people like that have full-time jobs and are successful in their own right, and they want to come in and just be your biggest helper and also give you their best feedback. The worst training partners I probably ever had would probably be Phil Harrington. He was absolutely psychotic. I literally saw him have drug overdoses on my couch. You know, I mean, the dude was just so completely volatile, you wouldn't even understand. So he was a very big distraction in the gym, caused Louie and Westside a lot of problems at that time. But I never really had a lot of bad training partners because I never surrounded myself with people I didn't want to be around. I think that's what created such high success. Another great training partner would have been Greg Panora. Greg Panora was one of those other guys that he could literally sleep in his car, get up the next morning and come in and stomp your ass on a deadlift or a squat or a bench. It didn't matter. So I was fortunate enough to be around those guys.
You were kind of around during the golden years at Westside Barbell. Between you and, you know, I'm glad you mentioned Greg. You know, he's another kind of favorite lifter of mine going through everything, and also another friend. When I look at things, Matt, and I hope you take this, as a compliment, I always saw you as like a professor in a fucking madhouse. You know what I mean? There was Matt Wenning, who had his master's degree, who was a professional strength coach, who had all these things kind of going on. And I actually talked to Greg about this. I tried to get some dirt on you and find a couple of fucking stories or something. He was just like, bro, Matt just had his shit together. Everyone else was stealing fucking food, living in their goddamn car, working at strip clubs, getting fucking arrested, overdosing on drugs, etc. How did you find yourself? You know, did you ever kind of look around and go, where the fuck am I? Like, what am I fucking doing here? And I know you had a higher purpose and you can kind of, separate that. But was there any times where you kind of just looked around and you're like, what insane asylum am I in? And what am I doing here?
Yeah, a couple of times, but I was still so young that I just kind of learned to stay out of everybody else's shit and just focus on what I was focusing on. And that really helped me a lot because then I could just focus on the numbers that I wanted to hit. I wasn't focused on Phil Harrington overdosing. I wasn't focused on, Greg snorting pills. I wasn't focused on any of those other types of things. I was just focused on me. And don't get me wrong, I didn't come over with my shit together. I'm not saying I had issues like that. I came over to Westside with $800 in my checking account. I had nothing either, but what I did was I had a plan and I was focused on lifting and focused on trying to get everything situated and settled. And it just seemed like everybody else was on a bottle rocket to hell. You know what I mean?
I agree. And it was always something that looking at the situation, it was always fascinating for me. One other thing, I can't remember the exact meet, but Mark and I came out to Columbus. I think Mark did a meet. You were there. It was in like it was in Columbus. It was at like a Friars Club or something along those lines. And you probably don't remember this, but you were outside. You were either benching the next day or whatever it was. And it looked like you were a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. You had this like back thing going on, and I think you had either bench, 800 or had something else going on. And Mark and I asked you, we were like, dude, what's going on? Because I think your bench went from like mid-7s to like mid-8s, like that. And we said, hey, what are you doing? And you were eating something at the time, and you just went, face pulls. And then you continued to eat and just kind of kept walking. And it was fascinating. Mark and I immediately went home and did, 14,000 face pulls. It didn't help our benches much. But your story kind of about your back, way back when you started being stronger than your front, but you've always been a proponent of that. Was that developed from the start? How did that kind of develop? And, how did you end up proving that to yourself? Not only numbers, but also, through your education.
Yeah, well, back to your thing, it was absolutely true what I told you. The face pulls is really what fixed everything. What I started to notice was I was reading an article by Charles Poliquin, which we became very good friends before he died a couple of years ago. And we actually did seminars overseas together. He started talking about these afferent and efferent motor patterns and postural balance. And what he started to realize, he said, sometimes your anterior pressing power is not always going to be related to how strong you are. It's going to be related to how strong your posterior chain allows you to be. And I started reading about how, the rhomboids and the lower traps and the rear delts and all the scapular muscles were the protective mechanism to how much your body was going to be able to press. So for about a year and a half, 2 years, I fucking annihilated my back. And not only did I notice my deadlift go way up, I started to notice that the stability of the bench press was increased by tenfold. The next big thing, the reason you saw the bench go up, and another big area of clashing that I had with Louie, was I went up and learned how to use a fucking bench shirt by Bill Crawford. So I went up to Bill Crawford's place, and I was benching like 700 or so, and Bill Crawford showed me how to tweak the shirt. He showed me what material was built best for me, and within 7 or 8 months, not only was I doing a 615 floor press raw, I was smashing 800. I remember taking Jail Holdsworth's name off the board. He had a 775 bench. I took it to 785 and then raised it to 815 before I left. Point being is that I was never afraid to learn from other people, and sometimes other people's techniques may work better for you than anybody else, and that's really what happened. I learned how to use a shirt better. My back got stronger. I got more stable. My raw power went up, and next thing you know, my shirt power went up. So that's kind of how it happened.
In this day and age, and of everything that we have going on in our industry, A, you're still learning. B, you're never scared to keep reading and look for advice. I mean, you're a coach, and you've been doing this for an incredibly long time, and you know a lot, but you've never stopped learning, and you always still have coaches. So if we were to kind of take a look at who you've been able to kind of be friends with and work with between Paula Quinn, Cohen, Dan Efferding, Kramer, Louis Simmons, all of these guys, who would you say, let's say, who is the most fun to kind of work with, to get to know? Because in my opinion, those are fucking icons. You know what I mean? Those are like the mountaintops of people to be around. Who was the most fun to be around? Who did you, have the most fun with? And who kind of taught you the most and kind of helped you develop from school into, where you are now? Because that's a big transition, going from a general, somewhat of a general education aspect of things to now being an incredibly successful lifter and an incredibly successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's hard because I think they all had their point. They all had their place. They all had their benefit, and they all had their time that made me what I am today. And I think that's what makes me great now, is all the people that I've backboned off of. I would say hanging out wise, it's really hard to beat Stan Efferding. Stan Efferding is a fucking legend. He's super cool. He has zero fucking ego, but he has massive work ethic. And just shooting ideas off of him on business stuff, he would probably be one of the most rounded lifters I've ever met. You got to think, he had a multi-million-dollar business before he was 35. He was an IFBB pro bodybuilder and an all-time world record holder in powerlifting. You start adding those kind of accolades together, it takes a special person to be able to do that. So I would say I would model most of my thought process and most of my demeanor. I try to really watch and learn from Stan. As far as down home, good person, Ed Cohen is nearly impossible to beat. So I wouldn't say, and it's not a knock on him because of that generation of lifting, but I wouldn't say I learned a ton off of him from lifting, but I learned a lot off him of keeping things fucking simple, right? A smart man can take a complex idea and get a basic person to understand it. And when I started doing seminars with him, I started to realize that he could talk to the average person that didn't have a background. And I was like, that is a key tool to being good. I think that's the thing, is I can talk smart stuff, but I can dumb it down enough to, and I'm not saying water it down, but at least make it applicable to most people. Charles Poliquin, as far as a walking encyclopedia, was completely insane. The amount of information that he carried in his brain, a quarter of his brain doesn't match most people's full brain. The amount of shit that he knew, and to get 29 gold medals in 20 something different sports, you have to know your shit. And so for me, having that knowledge and that retainability, and some of that's genetic, was always a huge want for me. I always wanted to, somebody asked me a question, maybe I don't know the answer, but I at least know around the idea to give somebody at least a shooting, a shot in the dark to maybe get them in the right direction. So I don't know. I can't really put one in front of the other. I think they all had their place and time, but I guess if I had to hang out with one, it'd probably be Stan.
We just had Eddie and we just had Stan on, and, I agree. You learn, especially from Eddie being such an incredibly important icon in our sport. You just you start to understand how genuine and how generous he is, and you know, when he could be someone who could be a complete prick and not give a shit about anybody else. He knows everybody's numbers. I'm sure you had a similar experience where he came up to me and complimented a deadlift before he even introduced himself to me, and I almost fell on the fucking floor.
Yeah.
And you know, that's kind of the person that, you know, you always want to be. So that's awesome. Let's transition a little bit. We kind of go through this with everybody. Give us your top 3 most favorite exercises, and then your top 3 most overrated exercises.
Top 3 favorite exercises. I would have to put, maybe not in 1, 2, 3, but reverse hyper. You know, as much shit as I give Louis and as much as we don't agree on a lot of things, him understanding the reverse hyper was a huge asset to me because I have offset pelvis from that car accident I was in when I was a kid. I think that one can't be stated enough. You know, obviously the belt squat machine that I'm kind of known for has allowed me to have insane volumes of squatting potential. And it was a lot of the reasons I broke all-time world records in the squat, because I was able to sustain thousands of pounds of loads of squatting that I don't think my spine would have allowed me if I'd just tried to use a straight bar. So I would definitely have that up there. And then I would say the third one would probably be a draw somewhere between a tricep extension or JM press. And the reason I say that is because once your triceps become so strong that they can overpower your shoulders, that's the time you're going to have a safe bench. So it's going to allow you to bench for years and years if your arms are going to take most of the brunt of those power movements. The most overrated exercises, it's hard because I feel that every exercise has its place and time. But I would say that training the traditional squat over and over and over again too much is probably overrated for a very simplistic coach. So a lot of times when I look at a workout, or I'm grading a workout for somebody that maybe wrote, or I'm assessing, if they're using the core lifts too often, then I know that their thought pattern is not mileage. So I think the overuse of the core lift is almost too much in today's shape and game of how people try to train powerlifting, because they see guys like Milanichev and Churchill and these dudes not doing a lot of variation. But it takes a special mindset to be able to do the same thing over and over and over again every week. And so that, to me, you know, specialization to me is what's killing a lot of the younger guys and burning them out too fast. Not really an exercise, but lack of off season. I think lack of off season is really killing us too, because we're not focusing on being good athletes and being good humans and being clean, you know, eating cleaner and being more healthy, and then attacking a powerlifting goal versus only having one goal and one mind eyesight. And then what ends up happening is you become unhealthy and become not being able to do what you want to do. But I don't really consider that an exercise as much of a mindset.
Really pumped you kind of talked about, you know, diet and eating like shit, because you're around some of the worst eaters in the whole wide world over at Westside Barbell. Can you talk to me about the Bob Evans breakfasts, the, you know, pints of ice cream post workout, the pizza with, you know, a bottle of olive oil spread on top of it to try and gain weight? I mean, obviously not everyone understood nutrition at the level as we do now. But let's talk about some of the unhealthy eating that was A, recommended to you, and B, that you actually saw.
I mean, anybody that knows Louis understands that all he gives a shit about is calories and maximum weights. I think the days of the overeating and doing insane shit were a little bit before my time. I know Dave Tate and Windler and those guys had talked about doing some crazy shit. The only guy that I knew that ate crazy amounts of food, you got to remember, Chuck Vogelpool ate like a bodybuilder. Even though he could gain 30, 40 pounds, he never did it with poor diet. He always had abs. Greg Panora was super ripped. So I was in the generation of Westside Barbell that we may not have known everything on how to eat, but we weren't carrying a lot of body fat either. The days before that with Dave Tate and Windler and all those guys, they would just do insane shit, to the point that I never even listened to it, because I was just like, these guys obviously don't give a shit about living past 35, right? But I can't remember his last name, but Big Tim was the guy that was the big eater there, and Matt Smith as well.
Tim Harold Jr. Okay. I guess there's some audio shit that's going on with my stuff. I apologize.
No, you just sound a little muffled. But it was weird when you were backed away from the computer. It didn't sound as bad.
So, be honest, how many of those breakfasts with Louis did you have at Bob?
So it looks like now we did lose your audio completely. So maybe just try to.
He was he was asking about Bob Evans. I was probably there we mostly ate breakfast together every max effort leg day. It wasn't every training day. It was every max effort leg day. It was, we would sit down, and it wasn't Bob Evans at that time. It was a place called TJ's, which is a way worse Bob Evans. Take Waffle House and divide it by 1,000 and you'll be at fucking TJ's.
Oh no.
The nastiest fucking shit you can imagine, right?
Yeah, we still don't have your audio. So what would happen if somebody tried to pay when Louis was around?
To pay to be in the gym?
No, to pay for breakfast.
Oh, see, what's weird is I don't remember him. He would only buy for what we called the misfortunates, like Greg Panora and like Phil Harrington. Like a lot of us that kind of had our shit together, we were kind of made to pay ourselves. So I know that Louis probably big on buying breakfast, but I think at that time he didn't have necessarily the same amount of money that he has now, where I think he's been known the last maybe 10 or 15 years. Those patents and reverse hypers and t-shirts that he was selling was enough for him to have a nice house and a decent car, but he didn't have the money, I don't think, until he kind of started conjoining with Rogue and all that other stuff, where he's probably like the breakfast buyer now. But back then, I mean, you know, the gym, just having the free gym membership, if you were good enough, was enough for us. We never really worried about the breakfast. I mean, sometimes he'd pick up the tab on breakfast, but most of the time, like he and a couple of the other guys that had jobs and had our shit together, we sometimes paid for the less fortunate guys, you know?
Yeah, every time I hear stories about those breakfasts, I think about the opening scene on Reservoir Dogs. That's all I imagine. Except you're all just a bunch of mutants.
Because it probably was a lot more crazy when Dave Tate was in his prime in the mid 90s, late 90s, because right before all of us got there, because there were, I would say, class to class, almost everybody at Westside other than Angelo Bernadelli and a couple other guys were monsters. But when we got there, Louis started to have this idea of taking records from all weight classes. So you had Phil Harrington at like 165, 181. You had Greg Panora at 242. You had me at 308. You had Mike Brown at super heavyweights. I mean, we had a fucking stacked class, and a lot of that came from us trying to beat Omaha Barbell with Rick Hussey, because Rick Hussey had guys from like 165 to 220 that were fucking unbelievable. They had dudes there that were crushing numbers and were really putting Louis on his toes, because, you know, Louis always got slack at that time. Oh, you can only make super heavyweight guys strong and blah, blah, blah. You can't make lightweight guys strong. And that's where I think it started to change a little bit in the early mid 2000s.
When we were down at Elite FTS, Mark and Dave were talking about how they learned a lot from Louis in regards to like how to like run a business, like, you know, it's kind of turning their passion into a successful business on this end. Did you pick anything up like that from Louis?
To be completely honest with you, in my opinion, I learned jack shit about business from Louis. I think Louis, in certain respects, probably has the worst business sense I've ever seen. If you look at, there's a home model reverse hyper that he had made about 12 years ago, and he got completely ripped off on it because he didn't have lawyers look over contracts. He made more mistakes in business than he has successes. So for me, I think sitting back now and having the lawyers and the accountants that work for me, I don't think Louis would have been a great guy to model any business off of. But with that being said, I really wasn't in the mode to learn business from Louis. I was there to lift weights and be strong. At the time, Bell, and I could be completely corrected, Jesse's known Bell longer than me, but at the time Bell and I were lifting at Westside together, Bell was probably never going to be a world record holder in lifting. I mean, as far as at that time when he was a 220 kid at Westside. So I think Louis knew that he had more to offer, maybe Dave and Bell in business orientation shit, and I was looked at as the next world record holder breaker. And so that might just be something that I just think about, and maybe not be true. But to me, when I came into Westside, there wasn't a lot of business talk. It was fucking like cutthroat, crazy shit. Cause I was Chuck Vogelpool's training partner. I was all these guys that, like, we were there for blood. So, I mean, by the time you got done, there was no talk about business because nobody had any fucking energy. You were trying to limp to your car. You know what I mean? But if you look at a lot of his business ventures, a lot of them have been poorly mismanaged. So I wouldn't say that I would. Now let me rephrase some of this too. Louis also taught me, if you follow your passion, you can be successful at it. But I never really learned the ins and outs of business from Louis. I learned the ins and outs of business from guys that were multimillionaires. I'd say I probably learned more from business from Stan Efferding than I did Louis.
That's interesting because, I mean, there are so many people that, have kind of come out of Westside and, have been successful in business. Do you think that's more of just some of the mindset, being out for blood, going in there and being relentless and having a work ethic? Has that really influenced your business more than actually someone teaching you how to be a businessman?
I think you got to look at every generation of Westside guys, Dave Tate's generation, my generation. We've all had massive success guys come out of there. And I think that was a draw for us to be I was at Louis because I wanted to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I knew that was the best place I could walk the walk, So for me, I think looking at how Bell I think Bell would have been successful without Westside. I would have been successful without Westside. Dave Tate would have been successful without Westside. Jim Windler would have as well. It just may have taken us a different path.
In fact, Matt, all of you were successful without Westside because none of you, and again, we're not blaming or saying, talking down. This is actually like your success came,
after,
in spite and after. Same thing with Mark, same thing with Dave, same thing with Jim's. So I mean, I think it's it's always interesting to kind of look back at it and go, wow, maybe you guys just learned how to work harder than everybody else and weren't passionate and wanting it, and maybe that's kind of the lesson that can come out of it.
Louis had the gym as a catalyst to attract the right people at the right time, but to say that he was in any way, shape, or form responsible for Bell or Dave or my success might be a little bit out in the far reach, but he definitely created a passion. I definitely would say that if there's something that I could give Louis credit for, was that he taught me that if I wanted to work hard at my passion, I was going to be successful at it. Maybe not exactly his way. Like I said, if you were to take me, I left Westside in the end of 2007, almost 2008. I have no idea how I got where I'm at, other than I busted my ass.
Right.
And I took the right chances and the right jumps when it said to jump. That's it. I mean, and Mark was the same way, and Dave was the same way. So I think that what you're finding is that, world-class gym all drove us there to be the best we could be. And then we learned how to have the work ethic once we left to make anything we wanted to be successful.
So sidetrack, I don't know if a lot of people know this. You're also not only one of the strongest people, to lift raw, also to lift multiply, but you're also one of the biggest human beings to actually ride a motorcycle across the United States.
Yeah. So a couple of my feats of riding is I've taken my grandma on nearly almost 30,000 miles of bike rides. We went from Ohio to Montana and back, Ohio to Nova Scotia and back, all the way around the Upper Peninsula of Michigan through Canada and back, until about 2014, where she just got old enough that she couldn't ride. But she was the only person in my family that was retired, didn't have to work, and she could just take off. And she was used to sitting on her ass all day, so riding the bike wasn't a big deal. But that's one big feat. The next feat would probably be riding in sandals, no-handed, all the way across to Illinois.
See, that was my next question.
Yeah, so that was cool. I'm trying to think. I've rode. I got back from Alaska last year. I rode that. I rode from LA to Florida and back home to Ohio. I've been out to super training and rode exactly through Mark Bell's gym.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not really big on the long rides anymore. They just beat me up too bad, but I definitely am glad I got probably 70,000 miles of long-term riding under my belt.
That's pretty amazing. Did you get any looks riding in sandals and without any hands?
I think people wanted to look, but obviously being around guys like Julius Maddox and Halfthor, you start realizing you're not the biggest motherfucker on the block. But to the average person walking into the gas station, I'm the biggest motherfucker on the block, right? Yeah. So I don't think people really they really didn't have a lot to say. I think they already are a little bit intimidated. So I had a handful. You know, what's funny is the older guys would stop and talk to me, but they never asked me about my sandals or, you know, I mean, that's pretty odd for riding Harleys. But I always was like, if it's not sandal weather, it's not riding weather. You know what I mean?
Love it. You just had Julius at your gym, and I saw a couple of videos, I think like a 675 for a triple. Being a guy who's been in the strength game for a long fucking time, have you ever seen anything like Julius Maddox?
I've never have. I'll be honest with you. I've seen Chuck Vogelpool's. I've seen, you know, you remember Chuck Fought?
Yep.
I've seen guys that are just completely out of this fucking world, and I have never seen the starting power, the lockout power, and the upper body mass that Maddox has in such a short period of time. I mean, you got to understand, Maddox only came on the scene in like 2015, 2016, you know, and he's doing numbers. You got to remember that Bill Kazmaier benched 661 and was a goddamn freak 35 years ago. And Maddox just did 675 in my gym for a triple with pauses.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable to me that I would have never thought in my day that I would have seen somebody that fucking strong in the bench press. It's just unfucking real to me.
So, you know, let's put our coach's hat on and kind of our fan of lifting hat on. What's his ceiling? What can he bench?
Looking at his technique at the gym, and like I said, Maddox and I are very good friends. He's under our media team now. We're gonna work on getting him better with all of his media stuff and try to help him make a living for his family. You know, he's a family guy. The big thing is that with his small technical things that he's doing, in my opinion, incorrect, that could be slightly fixed, I honestly think that he has 850 to 875 capable. Now, here's the problem. The problem is can he stay that big, that healthy, that long?
Right.
You're on a time window when you weigh that much. He's already had some gout issues. You know, when you're that big, your body's not only fighting to train, it's fighting to live.
Right.
And that's the same thing that Anthony Clark ran into.
Right.
So, in my opinion, and like I said, Maddox can do whatever he wants to do. But if I were Maddox and in that position, I would hit the 800 because I don't see anybody coming for it in the next 15 to 20 years. I would hit the 800 pounds and I would retire and I would get that weight off and I would live healthy because you've done something totally insane that nobody's probably ever going to touch. And now I think I would like to see him live another 30 years.
I agree with you. Can you share with us what those small technical things that you saw that you feel like that he could improve upon, and you know what and why?
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, you know, I mean, it's different for everybody. But when I'm handing out to him and watch, we could do a lot better at setting up in the lats. You know how we used to do that in the shirts that control those kind of weights. You can tell that when he takes it out, he's diesel strong. So when I handed him out that 675. I literally handed it out to him, and he told me, hey, I got it. Like he pulled his hair, right? I'm watching his wrist position, and he's doing it like old school Louis style where he's letting his wrist roll way back, and he's getting loose when he touches. Like when he touches it, I understand coming down strong and not wasting energy, but he almost tosses the bar versus locks in and pushes the bar. Now, he's so fucking big that it doesn't change the bar path. Right. But to the average person, they wouldn't be able to bench. If they were a 405-pound bencher, if they tried to bench like Maddox, they couldn't bench 365. So I don't really know how he's doing it, but the problem is when you're that strong and you're that close to hitting records, you don't change anything. Yeah. You know, you just let it fly. But if it were me and we were on a 5-year plan, the first thing I would do would be try to get him as healthy as I can in off season. And then I would work on his wrist positioning, and I would work on him staying tight when he touches the bar, and learning how to get the leg drive a little bit more in tune with the bar pop. And I think you would see an 850 bench.
That's amazing. Fascinating stuff. Speaking of freaks, you know, we sent you a question. This is something new to kind of our Super Friends series. We're going to have our Super Friends ask our next Super Friend a couple of questions. And we asked you a little bit to kind of think about, do you have any questions or anything that you just want to say to Kaylor Woolham?
Kaylor Woolham, the dude's a goddamn animal. You know, I really like that guy. He's very, very humble. And what I like about it is he posts his squats and his benches, which he knows he's not the strongest at.
Right.
You know, and whether he ever becomes a world-class bencher or squatter, who knows? But he's proven enough to me that he is willing to work hard and willing to work smart. and willing to work through his deficiencies, that he has all the respect in the world for me.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we're kind of winding some stuff down here. Before we let you go, can you let everybody know, what are you up to right now? You are so fucking busy, and this is a chunk of time out of your day. I know that you're working with some firefighters. You've been working with some military stuff. You have some manuals coming out. You're doing some stuff, online stuff. Just fill us in about what you're doing, what kind of day-to-day stuff is, and where people can kind of find more about and
Sure.
some of the stuff that you're doing.
So what we're doing right now is we're developing the power building manual. So I'm developing a manual series that builds upon each other like a pyramid, where you build a hypertrophy phase, then you work into a power building phase, and then you specify into either certain type of athleticism, powerlifting, bodybuilding, whatever you want. But what I find is guys like Stan and those guys have all created a base from something very similar. Same thing with Mike O'Hearn, another great lifter and world-class guy. So my days usually consist of, I try to read anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a day. I work on manuals and I try to do revisions. We have a massive online client base now. We have up 75 online clients. So that keeps the staff very busy. We have actually 4 online coaches now that's their main job. We're always R&D designing equipment. We're in the process of working with Dynamic Strength and Fitness on possibly doing a Wenning Strength equipment merge, and then me coming on as an R&D specialist to help them design better equipment to kind of put them above and beyond the rest of the industry. I think that's one of the biggest problems with the equipment companies is they don't have real lifters in there.
I couldn't agree more.
So I had a meeting in LeClaire, Wisconsin with Dynamic Fitness. So that looks really promising. We're working hard with ATP Labs, possibly Nutridyne coming on. And we're always working on the media team. We just signed Maddox to help him with his stuff. I'm going to try to get Bonnie Schroeder on the online to help with our stuff, to help with the female side. She represents a lot of the same qualities that I feel are very important for not only the Wenning Strength brand, but just fitness in general. She's super cool, laid back, especially Matt Vincent, her boyfriend. He's awesome too. So basically my day is always just trying to learn, train. I got clients at the gym. I am a head strength coach for 4 fire departments here in town, and also the largest automotive dealership in Ohio, Riker Auto Mall. It's the ones that do all the commercials with Arnold when you guys come in for the Arnold Classic.
Yeah.
So I work out with those guys and teach those guys how to train a couple of times a week. We do tons of assessments at the gym. So, you can find me on Instagram under Real Matt Wenning, because there's a lot of fakes. And then winningstrength.com is the website where you guys can get all the manuals, online coaching, equipment, things of that nature. And then we also run a Patreon channel, which is where I answer a lot of in-depth questions that come from the YouTube channel, which is also Wenning Strength, but also just kind of guiding a lot of strength coaches and trainers and people that are ultra serious. I find that if you put your information behind a paywall, that the people tend to listen a little bit better. I'm sure you can agree to that. So that's all the stuff we got going on. It's just 24/7, man. It's crazy.
That's it? That's all?
That's it. Still trying to stay world-class strong to where if I ever want to go back to do a meet, I always can. But for me, now that I don't compete, I love training again.
Good.
The variation can be better. I don't have that all-kill mentality that Chuck Vogelpool drilled into my heart.
Yeah.
To where, when I start to get competition mode, I'm not that nice of a guy, and I don't really do well as good as coaching as I could, because I'm so focused on myself. So now that I train, I love to hit those big numbers like that 505 for 5 on bench, and I squatted 650 for 4, and then stood there and held it, and then they added another 50 for 700 and did it for a single. So I still got it. It just, now it just seems like it takes me a couple weeks to heal from a big set anymore,
Yeah. I think we had a question from the audience, and then we'll kind of send you on your way, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, we had one from our buddy Matthew. This was going back to to JM Blakely. JM thinks that leg drive and speed work are bullshit. Just focus on the main lift and one accessory for the weak point. Matt, what do you think about that given JM's success?
Well, okay. How do you do this without being a hater? But I'll try to explain this the easiest way I can. 1, J.M. Blakely was only good for a short period of time. 2, J.M. Blakely was quick as fuck. I actually had this conversation with George Halbert that trained with him, and he goes, he was the only guy he ever trained with that didn't need speed work. So the point is that J.M. Blakely saying that to other people tells me that he can't step out of his own self and realize that not everybody has that level of force production. That's the big thing. And the other thing is, how do you take information from somebody that brings in a pet rock to the gym, right? I love the guy. He was the inventor of the JM press, and somebody said, hey, you don't do it like JM does. And I said, yeah, but I outbenched him in a shirt and raw. So I like JM. He was an evolutionary part of Westside Barbell, but I think at the end of the day, you have to be very careful. I try not to give absolute advice anymore. I don't say that this is no good or that's bullshit or this is bullshit, because at the end of the day, something can be applied at a certain time and place.
Right.
And that to me has an educated thought pattern to it. It's like we talk about your 3 worst exercises. I don't think there is a worst exercise. There's just a worst time to use it. Right. So leg drive is massive. All you have to do is watch Maddox do 675 for 3 and watch his leg drive. I mean, maybe he doesn't know exactly what he's doing with that leg drive. It's important, right? So that to me is just kind of one of those things where you're just kind of like, look at the whole body of work. Try to understand that some people you can take information from everyone, but here's my 3 pillars. And I'm not saying that J.M. Blakely doesn't fall into these pillars because he's a smart guy. 1, do they have the education level to have an opinion? 2, do they have the numbers to have the opinion? And most importantly, 3, did they stay around long enough to have an opinion? Right? I think if you haven't been lifting at a high level for at least a decade with minimal injuries, your opinion probably shouldn't be stated. 2, if you didn't go to school for what you're doing at a high level, then you might need to shut the fuck up and let somebody else take the reins because you might be saying the wrong things. And 3, just because you went to school doesn't mean you had anything on your back or in your hands. So you also might need to shut your mouth and listen to people that have done things for a long time under high levels of education with minimal injuries. If they have those 3 pillars, by all means, I would like their opinion.
That was fantastic. And, even though that was pretty harsh, it was still very political and could have been worse. But I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, again, I also just think that the way that you answer questions just shows your level of intelligence and your level of passion and compassion for the sport and for continuing getting the sport better and moving us.
Well, I believe, like I said, forward. I disagree with JM. I would say that if you're already naturally explosive like a Bo Jackson, maybe you don't need speed work.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself are you talking to a general population person that probably needs fucking everything?
Right. It's all about who you're talking to, where you're talking to, and how where they want to go. But
yeah, Bo Jackson lifted weights and didn't train to play football, but he was still one of the all-time greats. Do you want to follow his program? Probably not.
Probably not. But everybody wants to be Bo.
Yeah. Including.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, man, really, really appreciate your time. We appreciate everything that you do, who you are, and, taking time because I know you're busy. And you're, again, one of the most successful multiply and raw lifters, which, there's only a handful of you out there. And, I really hope everybody enjoyed what's going on and, the conversation here. And if you guys enjoyed what you heard here, what you saw, keep telling people about the Super Training series, the Super Friends series over here at markbell.com. Check out Matt Wenning Strength, and find him online. He's incredibly generous with his time. Fascinatingly, just brilliant. I really, really appreciate you, Matt, and everything that, I read and consume everything that you put out there. And I appreciate everything that you do and who you are, who you were for me as far as, letting me be a little bit of a nerd and still be kind of strong and know that that's fucking okay. And I don't have to hide that.
We go back a long way. So if you ever need something, you know where to find me.
Always, Matt. Really appreciate it. Love you, bud. Take care of yourself and we'll see you soon, man. Take care, brother.
Rock and roll.